1 Samuel chapter 23. David hides and Saul seeks. Then they reported to David, saying, "Look, the Philistines are raiding Keilah, and they are plundering the threshing floors." So David inquired of Adonai, saying, "Shall I go and attack those Philistines?" Adonai said to David, "Go, attack the Philistines and deliver Keilah." But David's fellow men said to him, "Look, we're afraid here in Judah. How much more so if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces?" Once again David inquired of Adonai, and Adonai answered him, saying, "Arise, go to Keilah, for I am going to deliver the Philistines into your hand." So David and his fellow men went to Keilah and fought against the Philistines, drove off their livestock, and inflicted a great slaughter on them. Thus David rescued the inhabitants of Keilah. It came about when Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, fled to David at Keilah, and he came down with an ephod in his hand. Now when Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah, Saul said, "God has delivered him into my hand," for he shut himself in by entering a town with the barred gates. So Saul summoned all the troops for battle to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his fellow men. Now David knew that Saul was plotting evil against him, so that he said to Abiathar the Kohen, "Bring the ephod." Then David said, "Adonai, God of Israel, your servant has heard for certain that Saul intends to come to Keilah to destroy the town because of me. Will the men of Keilah surrender to me into his hand? Will Saul come down, as your servant has heard? Adonai, God of Israel, I pray, tell your servant he will come down," Adonai said. Then David said, "Will the men of Keilah surrender me and my fellow men into the hand of Saul?" "They will surrender," Adonai said. Then David and his fellow men, about 600, got up and left Keilah and went wherever they could go. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he has stopped the pursuit. So David stayed in the strongholds of the wilderness, remaining in the hill country in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul searched for him every day, but God did not give him into his hand. By now David was aware that Saul would come out and seek his life while David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Koresh. Then Saul's son Jonathan arose and went to David at Koresh and strengthened him in God. "Don't be afraid," he said to him, "because my father Saul will never find you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul recognizes that." Again, they cut a covenant before Adonai. David remained at Koresh, but Jonathan went home. Then some of the Ziphites went up to Saul in Gibeah, saying, "Isn't David hiding with us in the strongholds at Koresh, in the hill of Hachilah, which is south of Jeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down whenever it is the desire of your soul to come down. Our part will be to deliver him into the king's hand." "May you be blessed of Adonai," Saul said, "for you have taken pity on me. Go now, make more sure, investigate and scout out his place where he usually goes and who has seen him there, for I have been told that he is very cunning. Look around and see in which all of the hiding places he has been hiding, and return to me with certainty, and I will go with you. If he is in the area, I will search him out among all the clans of Judah." Then they got up and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. But David and his men were then in the wilderness of Maon in the Arabah, to the south of Jeshimon. So when Saul and his men began to search, David was informed. Then he went down to the rocky area and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. On hearing this, Saul pursued David in the wilderness of Maon. Then Saul was advancing on one side of the mountain. David and his men were on the other side of the mountain. David was hurrying to elude Saul. Meanwhile, Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to seize them. But a messenger came to Saul, saying, "Hurry and come, for the Philistines have invaded the land." So Saul has to return from chasing after David and go to engage the Philistines. Therefore they called to the place the rock of separation. From there David went up and stayed in the strongholds of En-Gedi. 1 Samuel chapter 24. David spares Saul at En-Gedi. Now when Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, they told him, saying, "Look, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all of Israel, and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the mountain goats. When he came across the sheepfolds along the way, there was a cave. Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were already sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. So David's men said to him, "Look, it's the day Adonai has spoken to you about. Behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, so you may do to him as it seems good in your eyes." Then David crept and cut off the corner of Saul's robe stealthily. But afterwards David's conscience both entered him for cutting off the edge of Saul's robe. So he said to his fellow men, "Adonai forbid that I should do such a thing to my lord, Adonai's anointed, stretching out my hand against him, for he is Adonai's anointed." So David persuaded his fellow men with these words, and did not let them rise against Saul. Then Saul left the cave and went on his way. David also rose afterward, went out of the cave, and called out after Saul, saying, My lord the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth and prostrated himself. Then David said to Saul, Why do you listen to men's words, saying, Look, David intends you to harm. Look, today your own eyes should see how Adonai delivered you today into my hand in the cave. Some urged you today into my hand in the cave. Some urged me to kill you. But my eye had pity on you, and I said, I will not stretch out my hand against my lord, for he is Adonai's anointed. Moreover, my father, see, yes, look at the corner of your robe in my hand. For in cutting off the corner of your robe, yet not killing you, you should know and realize that there is no evil or rebellion in my hand. I haven't sinned against you, even though you are lying in wait for my life to take it. May Adonai judge me and you, and may Adonai avenge me of you. My hand will not be against you. As the old proverb goes, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, that my hand will never be on you. Whom has the king of Israel come after me? Who are you chasing? A dead dog, a single flea. May Adonai be judge and decide between me and you, and may he see and plead against my cause and vindicate me against you. Now when David finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, Is this your voice, my son David? Then Saul lifted up his voice and wept aloud. Then he said to David, You are more righteous than I, for you have done good to me while I have done evil to you. You have told today how well you have dealt with me. For Adonai has delivered me into your hand, yet you did not kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, will he not let him go away on a good road? May Adonai reward you with a good in return for what you have done to me today. Now behold, I know for certain that you will be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will rise in your hand. Swear now to me by Adonai that you won't cut off my descendants after me, that you won't wipe out my name from my father's house. So David swore to Saul, then Saul went to his home. But David and his men went up to the stronghold. Chapter 20, 1 Samuel 25. Abigail and foolish Nabal. Then Samuel died, and all Israel gathered and lamented him, and buried him at his house in Ramah. David then arose and went down in the wilderness of Paran. Now there was a man in Maon, whose business was in Carmel, and the man was so wealthy he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. At that time he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful, but the man, a Calebite, was harsh and evil in his dealings. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David dispatched 10 young men, and said to the young men, Go up to Carmel, and when you reach Nabal, greet him in my name. Thus you will say, Long life and shalom to you, shalom to your house, and shalom to all that is yours. Now I hear that you have shearers. When your shepherds were with us, we did them no harm, and nothing of theirs was missing, all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let the young men find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. So please give to your servants and to your son David whatever you find at my hand. David's young men went and told Nabal all those words in David's name, and waited. But Nabal answered David's servant by saying, Who is David, and who is Jesse's son? Nowadays there are many slaves, each running away from his master. So should I take my bread, my water, and my meat that I have cooked for my shearers, and give it to men whom I don't know where they come from? So David's young men turned around and went back. When they came and reported to him all these words, David said to his men, Everyone buckle on your sword. So each man buckled on his sword, and David also buckled on his sword. About 400 men went up from following David, while 200 stayed with the baggage. And one of the young men told Nabal's wife Abigail, saying, Look, David had sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, but he spurned them. Yet the men were very good to us. We were not harmed, nor were we missing anything, as long as we went about with them while we were in the fields. They were wall to wall, us both by night and by day, all the time that we were with them tending the sheep. Now therefore know and consider what you will do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household. But he is such a worthless fellow that no one can speak to him. Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 measures of roasted corn, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and put them on the donkeys. Then she said to her young men, Go on ahead of me, see, I am coming after you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she was riding in the donkey and going down by the hidden pass of mountain, behold, David and his men were coming down toward her, so she met them. Now David had been saying, Surely in vain I've guarded all this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missing of all that belonged to him. Yet he has returned me evil for good. May God do so, and even more to David's enemies, if by the morning I leave even one male of all who belongs to him. When Abigail saw David, she quickly dismounted from her donkey, fell before David on her face, and bowed down to the ground. As she fell at his feet, she pleaded, On me, only me, my lord, be the punishment, but please let your maidservant speak in your ears, and listen to the words of your maidservant. Please, my lord, pay no attention to this worthless fellow, Nabal, for as his name is, so he is. Nabal is his name, and disgraceful folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my lord whom you sent. So now, my lord, as Adonai lives and as your soul lives, since Adonai has restrained you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself with your own hand, now therefore let your enemies and those who are seeking to harm my lord as Nabal. Now let this blessing which your maidservant has brought to my lord be given to the young men who are accompanying my lord. Please forgive this trespass of your maidservant. For Adonai will certainly make an enduring house for my lord, because my lord is fighting the battles of Adonai. So let no wrongdoing be found in you all your days. If anyone rises up to pursue you and seek your life, then let my word's life be bound in the bundle of the living with Adonai your God. But let the soul of your enemies be hurled away as from the hollow of a sling. So when Adonai has fulfilled for my Lord all the good things that he had spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, then this will not be a stumbling block for you, or offense of my heart to my Lord, or needless bloodshed by my Lord avenging himself. So when Adonai had dealt graciously with my Lord, then remember your handmaid. Then David said to Abigail, Blessed be Adonai, God of Israel, who sent you to meet me this day. Blessed be your discernment, may you be blessed for keeping me in this day from shedding blood, from avenging myself with my own hand. Yet as Adonai, God of Israel, lives, who restrained me from harming you, unless you had quickly come to meet me, surely not only one male of Nabal's line would have been left alive by morning light. So David received from her hand what she had brought him, and said to her, Go up in shalom to your house. Look, I have listened to your plea and have granted your request. Then Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was holding a banquet in his house, like that of a king. Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was quite drunk. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. It came to pass in the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, and his wife told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he was paralyzed like stone. About 10 days later, Adonai struck Nabal, and he died. When Adonai heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be Adonai, who took the case of my insult from the land of Nabal. It has restrained his servant from evil. Adonai has returned Nabal's vileness into his own head. On his own head. Then David sent word and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel, they told her, David has sent us to you to take you as his wife. So she rose, bowed down with her face to the ground, and said, Behold, your handmaid is a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my lord. Then Abigail rose quickly, mounted a donkey with 5 of her maidens following David's messengers, and she became his wife. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and 2 of them were his wives. Meanwhile, Saul had given Michal his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish, who was of Galem.